Hello, everybody. I'm Robert Hawes. I'm the research director here at VERSPRITE'S VS Labs. And today we'll be taking a quick moment to talk about security products that are sold from vendors such as hardware and software, some of the marketing, and what does it all really mean when it comes to how impactful it's going to be for my organization if I were to purchase some of their products. The reason we're talking about this is because there's been a huge influx within vulnerabilities found in security products recently, and some very big ones, in fact, regarding news attention. Right? So we had some attacks recently within Palo Alto. You have vulnerabilities being reported within a whole range of security products, okay? So if you're an organization, you're saying, hey, we need to procure some software, hardware to help secure our organization, right? This is a very common question a lot of organizations have. Which vendor do we go with to purchase their products? Who do we choose? Why do we choose them? Well, one of the first things coming down to is how much risk can we mitigate, right? There is no silver bullet. There's no magical cloak within the world of technology that's going to, cast down and say, hey, you're 100% secure. Nothing will ever happen. This is impenetrable. That's not the case, sadly, at this moment. Maybe in the future, 2082, 3092, who knows? Maybe they have something. Maybe technology goes away. Who knows? But for the present moment, there are no magic cloaks, there are no silver bullets that can 100% guarantee they're going to protect you. And what do I mean by this, right? So security products, just like any other product developed in the world, follow the same rules regarding security practices and how they develop their products. These security products are designed to protect your organization, are commonly used as initial footholds into your organization. Antivirus solutions have been exploited. Firewall solutions have been exploited. Asset management solutions have been exploited. SIEM products have been exploited. All of these products, if we're following the same repeated history here, are all having the same issues. They're all vulnerable, just like any other piece of software or hardware. So what does this mean for organizations when they're asking themselves, hey, which vendor do we go with? And how do we know which product is going to offer true protection? Now, we mentioned earlier, you might be asking yourself, Robert, you said there's no silver cloaks. There's no magical protection that can save us from all exploitation. It's true. But what we can do is apply analysis to the potential vendors to figure out how much risk we can mitigate, right? Whenever I'm looking at these security vendors, these are some of the things I look for. There are the three main ones we're going to talk about is going to be transparency, trust, and acknowledgement. That's the first set. You have active engagement within the community. Second one. And the third one is timeline to patch, right? So these three, they provide a lot of insight into an organization so that you can make an educated decision about, hey, is their security posture well? And can I trust them? And that falls into the first set of categories. Let's dive into that right now. So trust, transparency, and acknowledgement. What does this mean? Okay, so if you were to procure some security software or hardware to protect your organization as a frontline defense, you want to be able to trust that product is going to do its job. It's going to protect you, right? And for the main part, a lot of these products do the bare minimum. They do offer some form of protection. They're not just selling you snake oil 100%. They do offer a form of protection. So when you're looking at these, let's say firewalls, for example, how do I know that I can trust them? How do I know they're being transparent? And how do I know they acknowledge the vulnerabilities? Right? It's very easy. A lot of companies these days are very transparent when it comes to vulnerabilities discovered within their product, whether it be, and primarily for third-party researchers, right? Some companies provide, updates and transparency of internally discovered vulnerabilities, but not all companies do that. A fair share are starting to move that way where they're sharing, hey, we found a bunch of vulnerabilities in our product internally during internal audits. Here's what we found, and here's our patches and updates for those vulnerabilities. However, primarily, you see a lot of that for third-party researchers submitting bugs, submitting vulnerabilities, and then patches are sent out and transparency is made for those vulnerabilities. Lots of companies offer it though. You can only go to their websites and you say, hey, where at on your website you provide this information. It'll be a security bulletin, knowledge base. There'll be some form of historical records of reported vulnerabilities, right? That's great. You have that information. Now what's the next step? So that's transparency. What about trust? What about acknowledgement? So let's dive into acknowledgement, right? Before we dive into trust. Acknowledging the vulnerabilities is very important. A lot of companies will try and dismiss vulnerabilities. They won't be completely truthful about reported vulnerabilities. They won't disclose it publicly. So if that company is not publicly being transparent and they're also not publicly acknowledging vulnerabilities, that's not a good sign. That's not good, because you want to be able to have full trust in something that's supposed to protect you. Okay. Now, what about trust, and how does that play into acknowledgement, transparency? Trust is the name of the game when you're dealing with security products, because you are trusting another organization to sell you a product that's going to have to protect your organization, right? As much as possible. If they're not transparent and they're not acknowledging vulnerabilities within their products, they're probably not trustworthy. Majority of companies these days are starting to become transparent and they're acknowledging vulnerabilities. That shows that, hey, they understand they're like any other product or software or hardware, that they're not impenetrable. They're going to have flaws. But them acknowledging it and being transparent shows to me as a consumer, hey, I understand and I trust them. If they're not showing me any information, they're not saying they're vulnerable, that's a red flag. That's not good. All right. The second one, community engagement, right? What does this look like? What does that mean? What does community engagement mean? That could be anything, right? You could be on Twitter. You could be on some other social platform, LinkedIn, who knows? So when I'm talking about community engagement, I'm talking about their interactions with the community surrounding reported vulnerabilities, right? I want to know, is this a positive interaction or is it a negative interaction, right? Are security researchers reporting vulnerabilities? Are they being threatened by the security company? Are they being harassed? Is the security company not even acknowledging the reported vulnerabilities from the community? Those are extremely red flags. If a company is behaving that way, I would avoid them. I would recommend that your organization do not do business with a company that doesn't want to acknowledge vulnerabilities being reported in their products. All right? That is what I mean by community engagement. And the last one, timeline to patch, right? So let's just recap real quick. Trust, transparency, and acknowledgement. That's the first couple ones I look at. The second one is community engagement, right? The final one is timeline to patch. Now, why is timeline to patch important whenever I'm making my decision about what security vendor I want to purchase their software or hardware, right? Why is that important? Why is timeline to patch so serious? Now, the reason it's important is because whenever you're reporting vulnerabilities, you run into this issue sometimes where you have this concept of a duplicate, right? So one researcher, we'll say researcher A, submits a bug to the vendor. They say, hey, we found a vulnerability. Here's my analysis, right? Another researcher, researcher B, submits the exact same bug and vulnerability in their analysis. This is what you would consider a duplicate in the bug bounty world or any other concept, right? So this understanding that duplicates happen, they're actually quite a lot more frequent than we would want to assume or think. So with this understanding, if you're a security vendor, right, and your timeline to patch window is, let's say, 3 months, 6 months, a year plus, it's taking you a year plus to patch your product and provide patches for your end users and clients. Assuming that others know about that exact same vulnerability is not bad, okay? So that assumption is actually valid. Assume that other people know about the exact same vulnerability that's been reported. So if you have a long timeline to patch and remediate and provide updates, that's a huge window for potential criminals, adversaries, nation states, whoever, for them to abuse those same vulnerabilities. And here's the thing, criminals or adversaries, their skill levels are no different than professionals, right? So if you're not familiar with the security world, you're not familiar with information security, if you're not familiar with exploit development, vulnerability research, actually building exploits, you have to understand that adversaries, just because they're doing criminal things does not mean their skills are less than those professionals who do the exact same work. right? That's not the case. So we have to understand that just because a professional, let's say researcher, submits the vulnerability to a vendor, they say, hey, here's a bug I found in your product, in your firewall. I found the unauthenticated remote code execution vulnerability. I built the exploit. Here you go. If that firewall company, that firewall vendor takes a year to mitigate, provide updates and patches to their end users, that's an entire year that someone else probably knew about the exact same vulnerability, right? It's not uncommon to have the assumption that others know about your bug or know about that vulnerability. That's not an uncommon thing. So timeline to patch is critical. When I'm looking at organizations, I want to see very short windows of patch timeline. I want to see 1 month, 2 months, 3 months max. 90 days is pretty much the max of what I want to see regarding timeline for remediation and updates to end users. If they're going like 6 months, a year out, and they're selling you security products to protect your organization, I'd be very wary of purchasing from that vendor, because that entire timeline window is extremely risky. Because not only do you inherit the risk of, hey, that's a long period, other people probably know about the same vulnerabilities, they're taking them a year plus. The more eyes that are looking at a vulnerability leads to increased risk of others finding out, whether it be compromising the internal team that's responsible for handling reported vulnerabilities, or maybe they're just leaking vulnerabilities. Maybe the internal security team for the vendor company is leaking vulnerabilities. Who knows, right? There's lots of things that could happen. But the important thing is that more eyes means to more risk of the bug becoming known by others, right? So it could potentially be known by adversaries or criminals. And that's not good. Once they find out, then it's pretty much only a game until someone becomes exploited or they start using it for engagements, right? So those 3 topics is what I personally look for as somebody who does vulnerability research, someone who does exploit development, someone who actually understands how do I analyze these CVEs, how do I understand and analyze vulnerabilities, what is their impact? Those are some of the things I would look for, because you can't guarantee that something won't be exploited. But what you can guarantee is that they have a positive security, I would say, culture or security program for their own product, right? And that's important. That's very important, because transparency, trust, acknowledgement, that goes a long ways, and it's mandatory. That is mandatory if you're going to trust an organization to protect you, right? Their community engagement, it's very important, right? You want to know that they're acknowledging and they're accepting and having positive relations with community and experts that are not only within their company, okay? Timeline to patch, a shorter timeline to patch window, and effective patching, right? Don't just like go out there and try and patch it the first day. It has to be effective. Those are all positives that I have to look for and see before I would say, yes, okay, I want to purchase this company's product, right? This is the company I want to go with. If you need help understanding some of this, or maybe you don't have experts on your team, you could share some of these insights to help educate, your team to be able to purchase the right software. Or maybe you just have questions in general about like, hey, what's the industry look like? What does vulnerability looks like? What does exploit development look like? Hey, I'm a CISO or I'm an executive and I see all these CVEs. I don't know what any of this means. That's okay. That's all right. You can ask those questions and we can talk about them, right? It's all about educating. It's all about providing honest and true feedback, okay? Hopefully this shared some insight of what I look for within organizations, specifically vendors, security vendors, to see which company do I want to go with? Where do I want to put my money? I don't just blindly put my money into an organization because they say they do something. Once again, if you need help, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to me directly, reach out to VERSPRITE directly. All of our communication is open. You can reach out to us through official means, email, reach out to our marketing department, all of that. We'd be happy to talk with you, happy to share insight. If you have questions, concerns, things you want to talk about, or maybe you're in the process of picking your own security products. You just don't know who to go with, Maybe you don't know anything about vulnerability research. Maybe you don't know anything about security. That's okay. Reach out to us. We're more than happy to talk with you and go over different concepts and different paths, right? We just like genuinely helping clients and helping organizations navigate these waters So feel free to hit us up. I appreciate your time today. I know it was a lengthy video, but if you watched the whole thing, thank you. Hopefully it helps share some insight that just because you buy things, don't trust or don't assume that they do everything they say they do. Because a lot of times what companies claim they can do can be very misguided. Once again, I'm Robert Hawes. I'm the director of VS Labs at VERSPRITE. We're here to help. We're here to just genuinely improve and solve problems, whether it be vulnerability research, exploit development, general research, anything you need help with, we're here. I appreciate you for your time. Hope you have a good day.